Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. First of all, I'd like to thank the more than 800 new subscribers I've gained in the last 30 days. That is a huge increase for me, the biggest increase in 1 month that I've had in my entire 2.5 years as a content creator here on YouTube. So thank you very much again. I will strive to put out good content on a regular basis. Now, for my returning subscribers who've been watching my channel for a while, you know that most of my content deals with supposed videos of Bigfoot. That has been a passion of mine all my life, something I've spent a lot of time studying. But one of my other areas of interest is aviation and space travel. It's something I've always been very passionate about ever since I was a small boy. And one thing that gets my attention is when I hear about possible decent footage of a claimed UFO. That's what we're going to take a look at today. Recently released footage supposedly showing a UFO over Beaver, Utah. Let's take a look. So here's the scene. Two guys are flying their high-end drone, a DJI Inspire 1, outside of Beaver, Utah, getting some imagery of the local area, and they capture something quite extraordinary. As it play this through, you're going to see this object come out of this valley right here, take a hard right turn, and go zoom in by the camera. It happens very quickly. I'll play it a couple times. And wow. I mean, it is really moving. I'm going to play that forward one more time for you, and then I'll slow it down so you can get a really good look at it. And now here it is, slowed down to about 25% speed, and you'll see that even at this slow speed, this thing is really, really moving along. And one more time. I mean, that thing is really, really moving. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was, of course, enlarge this to see if we can get any more detail out of it. Of course, at this extreme enlargement, over 1,000%, really all you're doing is fuzzing it up, but there still is enough there to see. And it exhibits some very interesting characteristics. Now, I'm going to scroll through this frame by frame. I put a little brightness enhancement mask on this just to brighten it up a little bit so you can see it better. And what's interesting about this is right about here, this object starts to change shape. Now, this isn't motion blur. Now, if it was motion blur, I would expect this thing to kind of elongate along this axis right here, but it's not doing that. It's elongating in the up and down axis, which is very unusual. The other thing is, to prove it's not motion blur, is that as it comes and makes this turn right here, it comes to a point where it's completely stationary for about 2 frames with respect to the angle of the camera. If it was motion blur, it would disappear. The motion blur would disappear at that point, but it doesn't. You can see this thing almost looks like a boomerang. It's very weird looking. Now it's made that hard right turn and it's shooting up towards the north, towards the camera, changes shape again into more of a cylindrical shape, and then goes back shooting off towards the camera. Now, as I said, this was filmed outside of a town called Beaver, Utah, and the footage actually provides us with some very good landmarks where we can kind of go and figure out exactly where this drone was, where it was filming this object. One of the obvious landmarks is a little road just outside of a town, and the drone comes down, lands right next to the road. There's a very prominent little dog's leg to the left, and then off to the west there's a very large mountain with a B on it. So that gives us a very good indication of one of the points where the drone was. The drone next flies off to the southwest until it comes up to a ridge line, and it's that point where it's pointing down towards the southwest and it captures the anomaly coming towards it. Now, there isn't really a whole lot we can do to tell the actual distance from the camera that we see this object, but we're going to take the worst case scenario and say that it's as far away as we can see it, which means it would be up back against this far wall of this valley that's off in the distance there, which is about 2.5 or so miles away. This is the point where we actually first see it. Shows up on the side of this mountain, or with the mountain in the background rather. Then it begins to fly down this valley to the point where it makes the hard right turn and starts flying towards the camera. Now, using Google Earth and their landmarks that we can see in the footage, I took some measurements. About the time where that object takes this hard right turn and starts flying towards the camera, again, assuming it's actually that distance away, is about 2.4 miles. Let's round that down to 2 miles just to make the math a little bit more simple. Now, like I said, this thing is moving insanely fast, and if you run the math on this, I mean, it is really booking. 2 miles, assuming worst case scenario, and it took it about a half a second. I actually counted about a little over 30 frames. And the exact number isn't really important here because it's not going to make that much difference in the math. But 2 miles in less than half a second. That's pretty fast. That's 4 miles per second, 240 miles per minute, 14,400 miles per hour. Fact check here. There is nothing man-made that we know of that can move that fast in a lower Earth atmosphere. All right. Conspiracy theorists out there can say there's all kinds of stuff at Area 51. I'm only going to deal with what we know. And the fact is, what we know is that Earth-made objects cannot travel that fast. Even the Apollo moon landers, which were coming back from the moon somewhere 20,000 miles per hour, would not survive in the lower Earth atmosphere, even just going 14,000. They would instantaneously break up and burn up. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that my numbers are off here. Maybe it looks like it's that far away, but maybe it's much closer. We can narrow this down. We can half these numbers all the way down to a quarter mile, and I'm going to tell you right now, the numbers don't get much better. Even if it's only a mile away, you can half every one of these numbers. 1 mile is just basically half of 2 miles. That's still going 7,200 miles an hour. Still way too fast for any man-made object to be traveling in lower Earth atmosphere. It just isn't going to work. Let's take it down lower than that. Half it again. At a half mile. Now it's going 3,600 miles an hour. All right, well, that seems a little bit more manageable. But still, any man-made object that's doing 3,600 miles an hour, you're talking about maybe an SR-71 or, I don't even think an SR-71 goes that fast, but you're still traveling way, way too fast for a lower Earth atmosphere. Anything going that fast has to be way up high in the stratosphere, well over 100,000 feet in order to be able to survive the stresses on the vehicle and the thermal element of what's going on there. Well, let's take it back down one more time to a quarter mile away. If it's a quarter mile away, that thing's still going 1,800 miles an hour. Well, now you're in the range of your more exotic military aircraft, F-15, F-16, SR-71, your MiG-29s. Those are aircraft that can probably do that speed, but they can't do it at this altitude. They have to be up to 50, 60,000 feet in order to be going that fast. The F-16, for example, it has a hard limit on the airframe of no more than 850 knots. Now, 850 knots at sea level, that's 850 knots. But 850 knots at 50,000 feet, that's more like 1,500, 1,600 miles per hour across the ground. So there you have it. Well, that leaves us with a couple of possibilities. Now, before I talk about the possibilities of what this is, I want to speak briefly about the footage itself and some of the circumstances surrounding its upload to YouTube. It was uploaded a few weeks ago. I'm not sure exactly when. I went to go check on that this morning, and I found out that the original upload had been taken down. For whatever reason, I don't know. I tried to get the footage off of YouTube initially. Now, I should say before that, they actually had a link in that video to a Google Drive account where you could download what they were calling the raw footage. I went to that first, and I was denied. Apparently, a lot of people have been trying to download that, so it exceeded the download limits. So I went back to YouTube. Now, interesting enough, when I tried to download it directly from YouTube, there was actually a 4K option, which indicates to me that the footage was originally shot in 4K, 60 frames per second. They uploaded to YouTube probably in 4K, but the what they call the raw footage over on Google Drive was probably output to 1920, which makes sense to be a much quicker download that way. Eventually, I did get the raw footage a couple days later, and was taking some good look at that. There have been some remarks made by other people that they don't think it was actually shot at 60 frames per second. I disagree. I do believe that it was in fact shot at 60 frames per second. It does have that look and feel of something that was shot at 60 frames per second. Now, the fact that these guys went and took the time to upload what they're calling the raw video to Google Earth for anybody to download and take a look at, well, I think most people would agree that that speaks to their authenticity, that they're not trying to hoax anything. However, I do have to say this. Just because something's called raw, doesn't have any edit points in there that you can see, does not necessarily mean it wasn't manipulated. really, the name raw, that's just what you name it. All right, you could take any piece of footage that's been cut, edited, spliced, diced any way you want to, rename it raw, and guess what? It's got the name raw. So the fact that it was called the raw footage does not necessarily rule out that it's been, manipulated in some way. Talking about what it could be. Well, I'm not going to talk about it being either a bird or an insect. All right. If you think it's a bird or an insect, I'm going to refer you over to a gentleman by the name of Mr. Rob Woodis. He has done a couple of really good presentations on this video, and he does some math, takes some excellent observation, excellent measurements, and I think he does a great job of completely ruling out the fact, any possibility that this might be a hawk, another species of bird, or an insect. So go over there and check him out. So in my opinion, what could this possibly be? Well, I think we have successfully ruled out, based on the speed that this thing is most likely traveling, that is not a man-made object. So that leaves two possibilities. It is either a craft of extraterrestrial origin, or it's a fake. It's as simple as that. I think I said earlier, I saw some things that I didn't really like, the fact that it changes shape. Another thing that kind of bothers me, I think if it was the same size all the way throughout, even with a 4K camera, if it was all the way back in that camera, or in that canyon at 2.5, almost 3 miles away, I have a hard time believing that even a 4K camera would have the resolution to pick out something that small from 2 miles away. That's just my opinion. So I'm going to leave it up to you. You can make up your own mind, all right? It's a bona fide UFO from another planet, or it's a fake. Again, it's up to you. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, welcome all my new subscribers. I promise to put out decent content on a regular basis whenever I can. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Oh, and please go over and check out Mr. Woodis' channel and his breakdowns on this subject. He does an excellent job. Thanks again. See you next time.